if you're brand new in the business and you've never locked up a deal before, you actually need to hear today's episode. And if you've been locking up deals for a while and need to get tuned up, just like maybe Kyle from the sound of this email, that's awesome too. And I think it's really, really important that you listen to videos and podcasts like this and you surround yourself with other smart investors so that they always keep you sharp. So long story short, Kyle has a great deal that he's getting from that he got from a phenomenal lead source, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But I want to talk about Kyle's email and how it affects you and affects Kyle. So Kyle had a deal on the hook, had a motivated seller who wanted to sell their property. And I think, and the numbers don't really matter too much here, but I think this was a Northern California deal, and they had it locked up for, I think, about $1.7 million. And excuse me, I don't want to say locked up. He had a verbal agreement with a seller to buy the property for $1.6 million. And it seemed like Kyle was a little unsure about what he could sell the property for. So the seller agreed to the purchase price of 1.6. Kyle had agreed to the purchase price of 1.6, but the property was not locked up under contract. So Kyle emails me and says, hey, I told one of my potential buyers about it before I had the property locked up. They went over to the property to go look at it. They started talking to the seller, and all of a sudden, the seller finds out that my buyer is buying the property for me from 1.65 or $1.7 million. The number's not really consequential. Excuse me. Buyer finds out Kyle's making between $50,000 and $100,000. Needless to say, the property is not under contract, but now the seller is extremely frustrated, finds out Kyle is flipping the property for $100,000 with little to no work. So Kyle emails me and says, Todd, what should I do? Because now the seller has confronted Kyle over this and says, hey, I don't like this. Okay, so first thing I will do is I will go on the root issue, because we've got a couple things that we have to unpack here. Number one is you should never have your buyers drive by a property or look at a property before you have it under contract. Now, why do we do this, right? Why do we do this when we know that it's not really a good thing to do? And by the way, if you're brand new and you've never done a deal, you don't want to waste your time trying to sell a property until you have the property under contract. And by the way, legally, you probably should have it under contract because you want to market your equitable interest. And if you don't have a contract, you don't have equitable interest. So let's start there. But the other part about this is that you want the seller's mind to be cemented that they're doing business with you. That contract, that agreement, that paperwork says to the seller, hey, this is a done deal, right? So if all of a sudden you send your buyers over there and you don't have a contract, well, all you're doing is giving your sellers a bunch of doubt, right? If all of a sudden the seller finds out that you're selling your property after you've locked it up, that conversation is a lot easier. But before you lock it up, don't do it. Don't show it. So the question is, why do we do this? Why have I seen this across the board, across many experienced investors and new investors? Well, it comes down to insecurity, right? We don't want to lock up a property in our minds, right, that we can't sell. We're like, oh man, what if I'm too high on price and I can't sell this? Oh, what am I going to do, right? It comes out of insecurity. So I've got two recommendations for you. Number one is get courageous on your numbers, right? You need to be locking up deals in a space where you know that you can sell them, right? So I highly recommend it. If you're listening to this, you invest in the no limit selling system. You learn how to negotiate big, fat, juicy deals. You learn how to talk to sellers, have fun. You learn the ability to walk away from a deal and have another one just right behind it and have this extreme confidence when talking to sellers. Now, I'm not naive. I know that not every seller is going to agree to your price all the time, right? And I want you to know that is also the case sometime. Okay, so Kyle and anyone else who's listening to this, if you're new or experienced, is if you're off on your number, you're going to be off on your number, right? But you want to lock that property up first, even if you think you might be off some. Because in this situation, some people are like, well, I don't want to waste my time trying to sell the property. Well, in this case, you wasted even more time. You wasted your time by calling your buyer, having them go over there, then talk to the seller, then imploding the deal. Now you got to do damage control because you don't have the property under contract. So the key is, number one, negotiate big, fat, juicy deals. Do it right in the front end. Close the deal. The seller is happy. Two, if you're on the line, you can lock that property up. Okay, have some confidence. If it falls apart, if you have to renegotiate, fine, but get it under contract. That is really, really, really important, right? I think that sometimes fear creeps in, like, what if I can't close? The seller's going to get angry. They're going to get frustrated. And as long as you cancel in a reasonable amount of time, then it's okay. I don't recommend that you get into a deal with the intention to cancel, right? But if you're off by $5, $10, $15, $20, $25,000, even $50,000, okay, have the property under contract. But don't waste time trying to sell a property if you don't have it locked up. I've also seen a number of times where wholesalers will think that they have a deal like all set up. They send all their buyers over there just because they're not sure on the number. They get the number, and then they go back to try to negotiate the deal with the seller. And now the seller is not even interested in doing business anymore, right? Talk about a waste of time. So get the deal locked up front, right? Get those commitments. I know sometimes it takes a little bit of courage. You got to be able to walk away from a deal. So Kyle says, what should I do? Well, first thing is you need to go back to the seller and go back to the pain. Right? Meet with a seller. You're going to have to build rapport over again because now the seller knows that you're reselling it to another buyer. Okay, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's usually the stage in the process. So what I would do is go and build rapport. You want a future pace with the seller. Hey, listen, when you get the money, what are you going to do with it? What is your life going to look like? Now, in this case, you may need to make a small concession if the seller all of a sudden realizes that you're making 40 or 50,000, and you've got to give up 10,000 of your profit at this point to get the deal under contract, because if you had the deal under contract, you could actually enforce your agreement. But right now there is no agreement. So you might take a little haircut here and learn your lesson there, but it's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, if you've built enough rapport, and I talk a lot about this in the No Limit Selling System, you should be able to get that deal back. One other thing, I talk a lot about being transparent with your sellers. And just because you tell your sellers that you're an investor and you need to make a profit does not mean that you need to tell them everything, right? It's not that you have to tell them every single detail of your business. Just like if you're in a relationship or you're married, you don't want to ever lie to your spouse. But you don't need to talk about every aspect or detail of your ex-girlfriend or your ex-boyfriend, or if you're in a marriage of your previous marriages, right? You don't need to do that, nor should you, right? You want to focus on the relationship that you're in and be honest, but you don't need to share every single detail. So my advice to Kyle and to all others listening to this is, number one, don't market a property before you have it under contract. Okay. Number two is know where that comes from. It comes from fear, right? What if I lock up the property and I can't sell it? And that might happen. Just make sure that you have good protection clauses in your agreement, right? Make sure that your earnest money is, $100 or less. I've done bigger earnest monies, but most sellers really don't care. And number two is have the right to inspect within your agreement. If the seller finds out that you're making a profit on the deal, okay, who cares? But at that point, have your deal under contract, have them done with the deal, have them thinking about the money, have them thinking about the vacation or the next house or the trip or the move or the relationship that they're headed to, okay? And lock that deal up in contract and then market that deal. But I think your deal is savable, Kyle. Just build rapport with the seller, and you may have to come up a little bit on price now at this point. I'm sorry to tell you that, but do what it takes to get the deal done. And I'm super proud of you, super impressed. And thank you for asking that question. Now, everyone wants to know, Kyle, where did you get this lead? Okay, Kyle actually got this lead from pay-per-lead service, who he's having a ton of luck with that now, right? And one of my favorite pay-per-lead services is actually fastsellerleads.com, fastsellerleads.com. I talk a lot about this in the podcast. And so if you're looking to get leads like today, you just go to fastsellerleads.com, you pick a county, you decide how much you're going to pay per lead. To register, it's free. And then they will send you leads from your county pretty much right away. And that's one of the easiest ways to get leads today. So Kyle, thank you also for sharing that pay per lead is working very, very well for you. It's one of my favorite lead sources. And everybody listening to this, invest in the no limit selling system. It's one of the best things that you can do for your business, to learn how to talk to sellers, how to negotiate, how to be brave, how to do bigger deals, how to do deals faster, how to handle objections, how to handle reductions when you have to, and also how to handle sticky situations like this one. So I hope you enjoyed today's show, whether you're watching on YouTube or the podcast, and I will talk to you on the next episode.